The speed of the iPhone 4S on AT&T versus T-Mobile's 4G speed. Go to T-Mobile.com/test drive.
David Jackson was murdered in 1988 in Florida. That much Detective Donna Velasquez could say for certain. But the rest? After more than a year of phone calls and late nights, all Velasquez had come up with was an increasingly complicated web of stories and relationships. David Jackson was married to Barbara Britton. Her father, Harry, disliked David. Barbara went on to become the fifth wife of a man named Michael Wolff. They divorced, and he later married 2 more times.
But we needed to talk.
But now, finally, one of Wolff's ex-wives, a woman named Nancy, was sitting with Detective Velasquez, telling police she knew everything about what happened to David.
Can you tell me again?
Because I know how he was killed and what they did with him.
How did she know? According to the ex, Michael drank a lot.
Every night he would almost down a whole bottle of scotch. And I guess he just needed to talk.
And the story Wolff told, according to the ex, implicated more than just himself. Here's what happened as Nancy heard it. Wolff and Harry Britton, Barbara's father, rented a motel room on that long-ago July night, invited David to a meeting there.
And when he gets at the hotel, they have a very small conversation, and Michael shot David in the head.
He told me he had to get so drunk to do it, and that the first shot didn't kill him. He had to shoot him again.
After which, as Nancy relayed the story,
They did take his car to the airport and left it there. Then they took him over to, there was an empty lot there, and that's where he buried him.
he did not spare the detail, said Nancy.
And he did tell me he poured some corrosive, and I think it was lies, what he said on the body.
And sure enough, that was consistent with the investigation.
Along with that story came what sounded like a motive. David disappeared, remember, as he was preparing for a visit from his 5-year-old son, John.
They decided that David needed to be gotten rid of because they never wanted David to be in Johnny's life.
David was murdered in cold blood just to keep him out of his son's life?
And boom, it clicked for me all of a sudden. I said, wow. I said, that's over child custody. That's why he's not here today.
That was the motive.
That was the motive.
But was Wolff's confession to an ex-wife a true story? Or just alcohol-fueled bravado? There was no way to know for sure. But it was enough at least to bring about the arrest in October 2004 of Michael Wolff, now living in Ohio. But an arrest is not a conviction, Meg. And as Michael Wolff cooled his very sober heels in an Ohio jail, he protested his innocence to anybody who would listen, including the local police, to whom Wolff sent a letter in which he claimed all he knew of the crime centered on a conversation with his ex-wife Barbara's father, Harry, a few months before the murder. Reporter Stephen Camp writes for the Broward Palm Beach New-Times and read Michael's letter. All Michael would admit to is meeting Harry in a park near the Walmart, overlooking the place where David's bones would later come out of the ground.
Michael Wolff said that he had basically pointed over to that plot of land and said, well, if you needed to bury a body, that would be a good place to do it. And then he concluded this letter with, and I don't know if he had listened or not.
Apparently, he did.
If Michael Wolff had really not known anything beyond that point, it would get him off the hook. And it would leave it all in the hands of Harry Britton.
So Michael was pinning the murder on no one but Harry, who was safely dead and could tell no tales. But now Detective Velasquez believed she had enough evidence to bring Michael Wolff back to Florida to stand trial for the murder of David Jackson.
We did the arrest warrant, and within a couple of days we were flying out to Kettering, Ohio to extradite Michael Wolff back to Florida.
How did he react?
He said some pretty harsh words. It's not very ladylike if I say it, though.
You can say it.
He said, I'm
This was it. Velasquez had her moment. Finally, after 15 years, she had made sure someone was going to be held accountable for the death of David Jackson.
It was the culmination of 16 months of such a long, grueling, up and down, tiresome investigation, of nights of not sleeping, of days of going to work and living off of coffee. And I thought, you know what? This is what it's all about.
It was November of 2007 when Michael Wolff went on trial for murder. After so many years, any physical evidence that might have tied him to the crime was long gone. But what prosecutors did have was the verbal confession, the drunken story his ex-wife said he had told her.
I'm sure he told me.
And then, checkmate. Another ex-wife told police virtually the same story.
He told me he shot him in the head. And he told me that he had a silencer on the gun.
Now she too was called to the stand. That was enough. The jury was out less than an hour. The verdict was guilty. At the sentencing, life in prison, David Jackson's family confronted Michael Wolff. Not just to condemn him, but to ask a question, because there was still a piece missing, something that still didn't make sense. What was David doing in that motel room the night they killed him? Why did he walk into that trap?
Why would he go to a motel to meet Mr. Britton when Mr. Britton lives 10 minutes down the road? I mean, David is not a stupid child at 24. Why would Mr. Britton want to see him in a motel?
Tell what you know, they demanded. There'd be no justice, they told Wolff, unless everyone involved was held accountable. Outside the courtroom, David's brother encountered the state's attorney and said,
"He's going to tell you." And he said, "He's not going to tell me anything. I saw it in his eyes. He'll tell you." And then we got the real story.
In fact, it was just 2 days later when Wolff finally confessed the true measure of his guilt and gave police firsthand his unedited version of events the night he said they buried David Jackson in the shifting Florida clay. Was someone else involved? Oh yes, said Michael Wolff. She certainly was.
Coming up, what made David go to that motel?
It was a woman who was on the phone. David takes the phone, comes out a little while later. He's all spruced up, ready to go out.
When Dateline continues.